What's up, ghouls, goblins, spirits, werewolves, witches, nightmares, vampires, spiders, scarecrows, and other creatures of the night? Welcome to Based on a Book, the podcast for fans of frightening tales that make you check under the bed or behind the shower curtain. I'm Keri, your ghost-obsessed bestie.
I'm Lindsay, and I'm here to give you the heebie-jeebies and the screaming memes, but not the hoo-has.
And I'm Crystal. I need more money for the book fair.
We have another spooky themed episode for you, featuring scary stories to tell in the dark, the short story collection by Alvin Schwartz with illustrations by Stephen Gammell and its supernatural 2019 film adaptation. So for those who do not know what Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is, it's 3 collections of short horror stories, which claims to be for children, that are heavily taken from folklore and urban legends. These are researched and cited by the author at the back of each collection, and they include jump scare stories, ghost stories, folk music, shape-shifting stories, retellings, and many others. So this episode's going to be a little bit different because the movie takes some of these short stories and the book itself and incorporates it throughout the overall plot. And because of that, I'm actually going to give a synopsis of the movie, which is actually just the Netflix description. So, the shadow of the Bellows family has loomed large in the small town of Mill Valley for generations. It's in a mansion that young Sarah Bellows turns her tortured life and horrible secrets into a series of scary stories. These terrifying tales soon have a way of becoming all too real for a group of unsuspecting teens who stumble upon Sarah's spooky home. Period. So first we're going to get into book ratings and quick non-spoiler reviews. Then we will get into full spoilers of the movie and how the book and some of the short stories were incorporated throughout the movie. So I know I told everyone last minute that the movie covers all 3 collections. But
Oops.
Crystal, what was your rating and just a quick non-spoiler review of the book?
The rating for the book altogether, I would give like a 2.75. Just barely better than half. 2.75 screams. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It to me was not like I read this as a kid. Like I got these at the Scholastic Book Fair and read them as a child and remember being a little creeped out, but even then it was more fun than it was scary. So to me, this really didn't like do the scary part, you know? And that's coming from me who tends to hate scary.
Yeah, I was going to say, everyone needs to check on Crystal. Is
I
she
was
okay?
I was okay. I was definitely okay.
Glad you made it.
Yep, glad
Thanks.
you made it through.
Thanks. But you know, I was prepared because again, read these as a kid. This is old hat for me. The minute you said you want to do these, I was like on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just didn't quite. It was fun. It was a fun read, but there wasn't anything in this that made me want to like make sure to tell everyone else to read it too.
Yeah, definitely. Lindsay?
I'm exact opposite. Again, my rating 4 toes out of 5. Who has my big toe?
Toes.
I probably gave it that rating for nostalgia purposes because
Mm-hmm.
I used to read these books all the time. This is basically where my love of storytelling originated. I was a daycare kid back in the day, and I used to take these books with me to daycare, and my
Aw.
friends and I, we would all get under the table and we'd read scary stories to each other.
Aw.
So good memories. So yeah, all nostalgia though.
Yeah. Yeah. I gave it a 3 on the scare factor scale. I think some freaked me out more than others. This is my very first time reading it. I've heard, like, really great things about it. I've heard that these were, like, classic stories that scared the hell out of people whenever they were kids. I remember seeing videos of it being on the shelves, like, at the library or something, and especially seeing the covers and, like, the illustrations in it were, like, terrifying as kids, but I never read it, but I definitely enjoyed more stories than others. I think I just, like, I mean, they're so short, it's hard to, like, connect to some of these stories, and it's hard for them to be, like, staying in your head and being memorable. So, once, like, a story was over, it was kind of, like, gone except, like, a
Yeah.
very small few. So, there was only a few. I mean, the illustrations were incredible and
Mhm.
honestly up the scale of scare factor for me.
Absolutely.
I was also, like, listening to the original soundtrack while I was reading it from the movie, and that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. If I read these as a kid, I probably wouldn't have been able to sleep for a week, to be honest. Pretty sure my sister told me that, like, she read these as a kid and they were terrifying, but she loved them, but probably, like, a 3 in general for me.
I think though the big difference is that this is a collection of stories that's supposed to be told,
Yes.
right? And so part of what makes these scary is the delivery, like
Mhm.
specifically like the front section that's like, you're supposed to jump out and go at the end of the story, like, and that's part of why I think the collection as a book falls flat because it's so kind of pared down, to just like the bare bones of the story instead of the dramatics of telling the story of, making the drip, drip, drip sounds when you're trying to like tell these stories in the dark,
Yeah.
or the who's got my toe.
Yeah.
Like it's so much scarier if somebody's telling you the story.
Yeah.
Reading the story just kind of
Yeah,
doesn't have
reading
quite
it in
that
your
scare.
head, it's, like, not giving it its
Right.
full effect that it's supposed to have.
Right, and a lot of these stories are taken from, like you said, like, from old folk tales and stuff, and, like,
Yes.
if you really dig into some of those stories, they're intense. Like,
That's
some
when
of
it
the
gets freaky.
yeah, it's really like, the folklore behind some of these is absolutely terrifying,
Yeah.
and so, like, to see them written kind of, like, again, stripped down to bare bones, it doesn't really have that scare, that punch that some of the full stories would have, I think. If he expanded, I think if he and again, this was written for children,
Yeah.
so it makes sense, but I feel like if he had expanded some of these stories, added some more dramatics and, instead of them being like the front and back of just one page, made them maybe like even just 5 pages, I think that would be terrifying.
Yeah. I think, like you said, since it's written for children, you want it to have, like, instant gratification.
Right.
Reading it as an adult, like, we kinda want a little bit more substance or something.
Mhm.
But also, like you said, they're meant to be, like, almost like campfire stories, like you're, like, reading it around a group of people
Exactly.
out loud, and that's how it's meant to be read. It's not meant I don't think it's meant to be read just, like, in your head,
Exactly.
and, it'll have a better effect that way.
Mhm.
So, kind of from here getting into, like, we're gonna get into full book versus movie breakdown, which means from here on out in the episode, there will be lots of spoilers. So, if you have not read the collections or watched the movie and don't wanna hear any spoilers about the movie, pause the episode, go do that, and come back and join us because we're going to get into a full movie breakdown. Which I think how they did the movie, because I was like, "I don't know how they're gonna do this because we just got a bunch of random short stories here, and
Right.
how are they gonna incorporate this into a movie?" And I was like, "Is this even actually, like, a real adaptation?" It says that it was made into a Netflix movies or made into a movie, and so I was, like, confused by that, and
Mhm.
I thought it was very interesting that they actually turned it into an entire overall plot, incorporating
Mhm.
the book itself
Yep.
into the movie. So, starting out, it's in the movie,
Wait,
like
wait,
I
wait, wait,
said.
wait. Can I tell everybody before we start
Yes.
that how I rate the movie?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
I give the movie a solid 4.5.
Okay.
I loved it. I was pleasantly surprised at, like you said, how well they incorporated the stories as the book. I love how some of the scary parts were taken directly from the illustrations in the book.
It was insane.
It
The way
was
that they did that was crazy.
and you guys know me, I don't like scary things.
Yeah.
I hate scary movies. I don't like jump scares. I
Mhm.
don't like the creepy crawlies. In fact, there was one part in the movie that, like, I definitely had to kinda, like, close my eyes, turn my head, like,
Yeah.
but other than that, I loved this. I
Yeah.
loved this.
Yay! That makes
That's
me so happy.
awesome. I
I know
was not
Crystal likes a
expecting that.
scary movie.
I know.
That's why I had to say it right away because
Yeah.
I don't want like, if you hadn't decided whether or not you wanted to watch this yet, I hope you do. I hope you watch it
Yeah.
before you listen
Oh my
'cause
gosh,
it's
that's so
really good.
awesome.
What's
I
really
to Go ahead, Lindsay.
it's really funny because the movie was okay.
But you are, like, the queen of creep, like, you love that scary stuff, and I don't, so, like, I feel like that makes sense that for
Mhm.
you, it didn't quite hit, and for me, it was just perfect,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I kinda felt like I was, like, right in the middle of the road. Like, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't, like, obsessed with it, I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate it. I was just kinda like, "Oh, this is kinda
Yeah.
cool," like, I kinda like what they did, but the fact that they brought these illustrations
That was
Mhm.
to
my favorite part.
life,
Yeah.
oh my
Absolutely.
gosh, like, we'll get into it as we break this movie down, and as we break it down and we encounter each short story, we'll talk about each of the illustrations, but the way that they did these illustrations exact to the T
So
was
perfect.
crazy.
So perfect.
So, how this movie starts out, it is Halloween night in 1968 in a fictional small town of Mill Valley, Pennsylvania, and we got teenage besties, Stella, Augie, and Chuck. We also have, like, a classic jock bully in his little
Mhm.
corny Letterman jacket named Tommy, and we
Super trope.
also yeah,
Like, super stereotype. Yeah.
yeah, and he's got, like, I mean, I don't know if it was, like, what this actor was doing with his little, like, pursed lips, like, just trying to be like
Right?
just an asshole. I was like, "What are you doing?
He's just
Chill.
a jerk. Just a
Calm
jerk.
down." Pretty sure he did a line of coke before he freaking came out here because he's just, like, sweating to death the entire
Mhm.
time, and he's
Mhm.
just like his eyes look insane, and I'm like, "Back up." Like,
Yeah.
I didn't do anything to
And then,
you.
like,
Like,
the
I felt
one
like he
girl
was trying to
goes on a
fight
date with
me.
him, and I was all like, "Why would anyone go on a date
Yeah.
with that
Yeah,
guy?"
so now we
Like
have the annoying, like, big sis Ruth, like, the classic big sister, and
right.
of Chuck, you know?
Mhm.
It's starting out to be, like, the classic teen, horror, fun, Halloween night intro. Everyone's getting dressed in their awkward costumes for trick-or-treating. Big sis is yelling at her little brother because for some reason he is fishing literal shit out of the toilet so he can light it on fire and throw it at the jock.
Which, when I was a kid and we did, like, flaming bags of poo, we used, like, dog poo or something that was in the yard and easy to get to. We didn't fish out human feces from the toilet. So that part, I was definitely like, "What is happening here?"
First off, he was on his walkie-talkie with the fishnet against his mouth,
Yeah,
given it was before he fished it out, but
but still,
gross.
yeah, I noticed.
And then he had the bathroom door open.
Right?
And like, big sis walks by, she's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Get her!"
Like,
Throws the
who
door closed.
I just yeah, there were definitely moments in this movie that were like, "Wait, what?"
Was he actually pooping with the door open? When the door opened, why was it open? I don't
Right.
understand.
Yeah.
Like,
Maybe he had to
honestly, I
open
was
it to go get the
concerned.
fishnet, but, like
He was sitting there with the fishnet the whole time.
That's true, it's just messed up.
Yeah, it
I didn't
was
like Augie, I didn't like Chuck, I didn't like him.
yeah, yeah. It was
But
just
I
weird.
think again though, like the book was written for young kids and the
Mhm.
movie was only rated PG-13. I
Yeah.
think it was targeted towards teenagers too.
It was targeted towards a new generation of horror fans to get the kids into this.
Right.
It should have been targeted towards the adults who read the book as children. Age it up with us.
I can
That's
see
what I
that.
wanted. Rated R.
I can see that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So they all get together and they all go trick or treating with their bag of poo, and while he's eating candy,
And he's just carrying it around with him.
yeah, like no one smells this bag of,
Nobody notices. Like
yeah,
even
no
in
one.
his house when he's like saying goodbye to his parents
Oh
on the
yeah,
way
he's
out,
holding it.
he's
Like he
holding
puts
it
it
in
on
his
the
hand.
counter. He puts it on the
He just
counter.
sets it right there. And this is not a plastic bag. This is like a brown paper lunch
Yeah.
bag. And he
Yeah.
just sets it on the counter. And then he grabs it in his hand and hugs his mom. So it's like around her and she doesn't notice the smell. She
Yeah.
doesn't at any point like, what the hell are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
no.
So we finally find out what he's gonna do with this bag of poop on fire is he sees the bully on a date with his big sister driving by, and he throws it at the bully and it lands on his lap and is on fire.
Well, first he's got the typical pillowcase full of
Yeah.
candy, but it's full of underwear.
Oh, yeah. I
'Cause
forgot about that
they
part.
Right.
snatch the bag from his hand and like, "Oh, what's that smell?" And they're like, "Oh, old man underwear or something." I don't know.
Yeah. That was I was like, "What is
I
going
don't
on
know what
here?
that was
Is
about.
this what the kids are doing now?" Like, what is
Well,
going
and this so
on?
this is so when was this? This was set in like the mid 60s during
Yeah,
Vietnam.
true,
68,
true.
I think.
And so like I I trick or treated in the 80s.
Mhm.
And so like I can't say that I understand that at all, the underwear part. But the flaming bag of poo thing is something we still did in the 80s.
Yeah.
Again, not human feces.
Yeah, that's so
Just
weird. Not your
and the
own human
idea
feces.
right, and the idea was you left it on someone's porch to ding dong ditch, and then when they came out and saw it on fire, they'd stomp it and they'd get shit all over their feet.
Yeah,
Like, well, their shoes,
yeah,
hopefully. But like,
yeah.
I've never, I don't understand the underwear thing, and I don't understand why he threw it into a car. That was
Yeah,
not,
While
I
he
don't
was
get
driving
that.
the car.
While
yeah, and
someone
it
was driving
sister
the
in
lights
car.
it.
yeah, it lights his whole lap on fire. He gets out, he freaks out, runs after the group of besties with a baseball bat with his friends, and then they run into a drive-in. It's like and then they meet up with, they run into a car to hide from the bullies, and they meet
It's just a
Ramon.
random car. They just
Yeah,
jump in some random stranger's
yeah,
car.
yeah, and they meet Ramon. And so as they're hiding from this bully who's, like, banging on the car door, and Ramon, he doesn't care. He's like, "Okay, what you gonna do about it? You ain't gonna come in here. You
Pretty
can go
much.
move along. See ya." And they're just, like, yelling at him and threatening him, and this guy still looks like he's, like, cracked out of his mind.
And presumably still covered in poo.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He's like, literally, I can't get over the bully. Like, the bully literally looks like I'm like, "You definitely are on drugs right now. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're literally sweating all over me,
That was
yeah,
wild.
out in the window, and just, like, staring at me with your bloodshot eyes." Like, I can't he was, like, dripping in sweat. Like, he was scaring me, and I was like, "Stop looking at me. I'm not gonna fight you. I'm just
Right.
watching this movie. Chill." So for some reason, they all then decide Stella looks over them after this whole incident happens,
Well,
and they
she's making eyes at Ramon.
yeah, she's making eyes at Ramon, and after this whole incident happens, she looks at him, she's like, "You wanna go to a haunted house?" So then
Mhm.
they all drive to the Bellows house, where the Bellow family lives, this haunted home, this famous haunted home in this town, where there's a secret room where this famous Sarah Bellow resided. We don't know too much about the Sarah Bellow, but there's a lot of rumors in this town about
Right, that they locked up their daughter,
yeah,
and
about
everybody's
Sarah
like,
Bellow.
no, that, nobody did that, whatever. And they were all like, no, they locked her up.
Yeah. She was known to tell stories. Like, you could, there
Through
was
the
like,
wall.
there were rumors that you could go to this haunted house and you could hear stories through the wall from her. So they're all like walking around this house, like looking at things, and they find like a cellar. And they go down in this cellar.
A hidden
And
cellar
a
behind a
hidden cellar.
bookcase.
And immediately, like, first of all, I ain't going in no haunted house.
Yeah, they just walk right on down. I was like, we're waiting until sunup before we try this.
Yeah, no. And in the meantime, so Ramon and Stella separate from Augie and Chuck, and they're like walking around. And Augie and Chuck are having like their own little paranormal incident happening with them in the other room.
Because he goes in, they're gonna like scare each other.
Yeah. Which I knew it was gonna be a jump scare. I was like, nope.
Oh yeah.
No. Don't do it. Don't do it.
But again, this is what I liked about this movie. It was predictable enough
Yeah.
that I could prepare myself for those moments.
Yeah. So you're okay with a jump scare as long as it's predictable.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
Good to
Makes
know.
sense.
Noted.
Yeah. See, I'm like, oh, that's what's gonna happen. Like, I need it to scare the crap out of me. I want to be jumping and screaming.
Nope. No, thank you.
If I'm not jumping and screaming, I'm not having a good time.
No,
I
thank
like
you.
Lizzie said, I like it.
I approve.
So they go in the cellar that they found that no one was really aware of, and they find this book that's known as like Sarah Bellows' book, and it's this book of like
all the scary stories.
All the scary stories.
All of them.
Which is the book that we are reading. That is full of this collection of stories. And it's also, I think, that there were rumors that she was like accused of witchcraft.
Right. She was accused of witchcraft for killing the town children.
Yeah.
The children in the town.
And that she had allegedly committed suicide. That was like a rumor that was going around. So as they're down in the cellar, they're like looking at this book. Tommy, the bully, finds them, and he's with Ruth, the sister, locks them in the cellar to be stupid, and is like yelling at them and just locks them in there. And somehow Stella's like talking to a ghost, or tells Sarah Bello to tell her a story.
I just want to add, there are 3 stories that they kind of show when they're flipping through the book.
Yeah.
It's the cat's paw, the attic, and I don't want to say the last one because it's cursed.
We
but
don't
the Windy
say that.
Boys. Yeah, you don't say.
We don't say that.
The cat's paw is from book 2. More scary stories to tell in the dark. The attic is from the first one, and the Windy Boys is from the first one.
Yeah. You'll notice, like, as she's like flipping through the book, you'll recognize some of the stories sometimes.
Yeah.
And the cat's paw from the second book, that's the only mention of the second book. Not that they even really mention it, but that's the only time the second book is in the movie at all.
Yeah. So somehow the cellar door opens up, like her
ghost opens it.
Yeah, opens it. And at that point, I'm pretty sure that's when the sister Ruth, because she has like a spider web fall on her, and she gets bit in the face by a spider, which is important later. So at that point, they go outside, and Ramon's car is completely messed up because Tommy is...
And he had a baseball bat, and he's a jerk.
Yeah, and he's a jerk. A complete jerk. Messed up the car. Stella brings Ramon back to her place and says, you can sleep at my place.
In the basement, yeah.
In the basement.
Just don't let my dad catch you.
And Stella did something very, very foolish that you never do. You take something from a haunted house. You never do that.
You never do that. Everyone knows that rule.
You never remove something from a haunted house. She took the scary story book from the house.
And because, spoiler alert, she wants to be a writer.
Yep. Spoiler alert. Classic. They always want to be a writer. The female main character is always a writer. Oh my god.
Always collecting stories.
Yep.
And she wrote the story Sam's new pet, where it turns out the pet is a sewer rat, which I think is from book 3.
Yeah. And then she brings the book back and she's reading through the stories. She's like flipping through the stories, and there was previously a blank page, and it's no longer blank. It is now has a story on it that has fresh, quote,
Blood.
ink that's red
Blood.
and wet, but it's blood. Blood.
It's so gross.
With the title of Harold.
It's a
And
creepy one.
I
yeah,
actually
this
really like that story.
yes, I like the story. Okay, so this is the first encounter of a short story in the collection that is like a full short story. And it has the same character name. I believe his name is Thomas in the short story,
I
I
think so.
think. And so she's reading this short story titled Harold, and she is seeing it written out. It's like freshly written. And then in the meantime, it pans over to Tommy, the bully, where he is at like his family farm or something, and he has to, I forget what he has to do, but he has
Deliver
to
eggs.
deliver eggs, and he has to go in this cornfield where there's a scarecrow named Harold, which is part of this scary stories. And Harold looks exactly like the
Mm-hmm.
illustration. It's
It's terrifying.
insane.
It's
It is
terrifying.
terrifying. And he's like, I don't know if he's like, I mean, like I said before, I'm gonna keep saying it. The man is on drugs or he's drunk. I'm not sure. But he's like
He's actually drunk in that scene.
yeah. He's like literally like cannot walk in a straight line. And this is also in the book, but they like always like when they're mad about something or something, they'll like hit him as they pass by, hit the
Mhm.
scarecrow when they pass by. And he does that. He like kicks the scarecrow when he passes by, and the scarecrow is terrifying. Like it is ugly.
Like
It's got
the head is like a gourd that's like half
yeah,
rotted and there's like
yeah,
maggots and stuff in there.
bugs in the eyeballs, everything.
Yeah, it's gross.
And he walks by it, and he like kind of like turns in the cornfield and notices that he's facing the scarecrow again. Like
Mhm.
every corner he's turning, he is facing the scarecrow. So it's like something's happening where the scarecrow's like
And it kinda
moving.
like yeah, and it clicks in his head that like this ain't right.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden the scarecrow's no longer there. And then all of a sudden the scarecrow's chasing him and eventually stabs him with a freaking pitchfork. And I thought he was just gonna die
No.
because I'm pretty sure in the book, like this doesn't happen in the book where he's turned into a scarecrow.
No, the scarecrow comes to life in the book, and the whole premise of the story is that it's the 2 farmers who go up on the mountain during a certain season. They stay there for a month and then they go home.
Yeah.
So the scarecrow comes to life and starts moving around, and they're afraid of it, obviously, and they decide to take their herd of sheep or whatever it is and go home. But one of them forgets something, so he goes back to the house, and the other guy's looking, and he sees Harold on the roof of the house laying out the
Like his
skin.
skin. Yeah, his skin.
Yeah, to dry.
So,
Yeah.
I'm also noticing that is very common whenever they bring in these short stories. It's more about like the overall premise and the character that they're bringing in of
Mhm.
each story,
Right.
not necessarily the story itself.
Right.
So, it's definitely not exactly the
Right. And
same
they combine
between
some a little
yeah,
bit and yeah,
definitely. Which
it's
I
more like
get.
it's more like the shadow of the story.
Yeah, exactly. Where so he gets stabbed with a pitchfork and he gets turned into like I can't stand this. He's
It freaked me out.
gagging he's gagging and straws coming out
And
of
he's
his
like
mouth.
clawing at his skin, and
Yeah, he can't breathe.
he's
I was like,
clawing
I
at his
can't breathe.
arms, and he's clawing at his stomach, and you just see more straw popping out of him.
Yeah,
Like,
because he's literally turning into a scarecrow.
Mhm.
So, and this becomes like news in this small town because this is a very small town. He's like very
right.
famous,
And they're like, "Oh,
jock.
Tommy's missing. Tommy's missing.
Yeah.
We're looking for Tommy. Have you
Yeah.
seen Tommy?"
hmm And police are questioning Ramon because everyone knows the last incident Tommy had with someone was
Right, and
with
Ramon's a
Ramon.
stranger in town. He's
Yeah.
not from there.
Yeah.
So, anybody who's the new guy in town. And he's Mexican, which there's like racial slurs that have been written
Yes.
all over his car. And so, like,
Yeah.
because again, this is set in the 60s. So there's definitely like suspicion automatically goes to the Mexican new guy that nobody knows. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And so Stella kind of realizes this and puts this together immediately when she notices that Tommy's missing. She just read the story that
That
was
was
written out
about Tommy.
that was about Tommy, said Tommy's name in it. She makes Ramon take her to go see at Tommy's house and go see the scarecrow that has the Letterman jacket still on the scarecrow. And
Mhm.
she's like, this literally was written out in this story. I just saw it. This is not good. So she actually, after noticing this, she attempts to return the book back to the house. She's like, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm taking this book back. And in classic
Too
fashion,
late.
it is way too late for that because the book is back and it's in your room.
You have angered the ghost.
You have angered the ghost and it is here and present
Haunted.
in your life. Haunted. Haunted and now it's in your room.
It's
It is
coming for
in
you,
your
girl.
room. It is now in your friend group. So now I think Ramon like sees the book and he's like reading it and she's like, where'd you get that? Because I got rid of that and now it's here. And now a new story is appearing before her very eyes and before Ramon's eyes, who didn't believe her whenever she was trying to explain the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Sarah has entered the chat.
yeah. Sarah has entered this chat. And you know what else has entered the chat? The big toe.
The toeless corpse.
The toeless corpse, which I think is probably the most terrifying story. Or I mean, not the most terrifying story in this book, but the most terrifying scene in this movie,
The
to
most
be honest.
disgusting scene.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they're watching this story get written out in this book, and they see Augie's name. So they get their little walkie-talkie, and they're like, Augie, where are you? What are you doing? And he's like, I'm going to eat some soup. From that he has nowhere where it came from. He doesn't know where it came from, but I'm going to eat some soup.
He's just like, there's stew in the fridge.
Yeah.
Like, works for me.
He
And
was the one at the beginning of the movie who was like trying to lecture them about what they're eating and being health conscious about the food. And he's just going to eat this random soup.
Yeah. And so he starts eating it, and they're like, you need to not, are you eating? Like, what are you doing? Like, you need to not.
Don't eat anything.
Yeah, don't eat anything because
And
we're
he's like,
literally
oh,
reading this out.
yeah, and he's like, I know this story. My dad used to tell me to scare me. It's just a story.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he's scooping out what he probably thinks is a piece of sausage.
Mm-mm.
Is a big toe with a big toenail.
Ugh. So gross.
And okay, first of all, literally ate it whole.
And then
Ate
realizes
it
what's in
whole.
my mouth and spits it out, but it's
Yeah.
too late. He done had some of it already.
He had a big toe in his mouth.
Oh man, that's so gross.
I was screaming. And then he like throws the whole stew everywhere.
begins
Spits
to
out the big
retch.
toe.
Yeah.
Literally freaks out, and then he hears
There was an eyeball
something.
in there too, by the way.
Yeah, there was like bits of things in there. Who
Yeah.
knows what else?
When I saw the eyeball, I was just like, nope.
Yeah, and then he starts freaking out, and then he hears like something is like, "Where's my toe?"
Mhm.
Oh, and when she's saying it over the walkie-talkie too at the same time, it was so creepy.
It was so creepy.
It was at the same time. And so he's like running away from whatever is like trying to come after him. And he runs into his room, and the thing walking The corpse walking down the hallway.
That was
with
so
the toeless
creepy.
corpse. Oh my god. I was freaked out. I did not like that thing.
And so she like Stella's still on the walkie-talkie though, and she's
Yeah.
like, we're coming, we're almost there. We're only 2 blocks away. We're a block away. We're almost there. Like,
Yeah, and then he hides under the bed, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're, like, actually trying to give me an anxiety attack right now."
right? Like everybody knows better.
Yeah,
Like you don't hide under the bed. You don't go upstairs.
Don't go
And
upstairs.
you don't hide under the bed.
yeah. So, and then this corpse thing grabs him and basically, like, takes him
Yeets him
away.
into another dimension.
Yeah, yeets him into another dimension.
Just
Yeets him
gone.
somewhere, and we have no idea. And they, Stella and Chuck get there, and or no, not Chuck. I think it
Ramon.
was Ramon.
Ramon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stella and Ramon get there, and he's gone.
He's
Nowhere
gone.
to be found.
But they see his like where he scraped his nails across the
Yeah.
floor trying not to get yeeted. Like
Trying not to get yeeted.
every time I see anybody like dig their
Corpse said
nails into
yeet.
things, pretty much. But anytime I see anything like that where people are like digging in with their fingernails, like I bite my nails, they're short, they're tiny little stumps. But like all I can think of are like the splinters.
Yeah.
Like
That's when you know, like, the desperation is real, like,
yeah.
you're literally digging into the ground.
Like that just
It freaks me out.
it
Those
freaked me out.
floorboards were weak if he was able to, like, do those
That's
full
what I'm
scratch
saying.
marks and not break a nail.
Full
Yeah.
scratch marks, like all 5 fingers.
So, Augie's gone. Like, literally gone.
Gone.
And at this point, they attempt to destroy the book. And of course, nothing happens. The book cannot be destroyed. They try to light it on fire and all this stuff. They tell Chuck about what happened to Augie, and they tell Ruth, Chuck's sister,
Who
Mhm.
has a giant red spot on her face.
Yep. And
Yup.
she claims it's a pimple. It ain't no pimple, sis. It's not a pimple, sis. It's looking a little sketch.
I'm
So
just saying,
then-
like, so these kids, like, we know that they've been told scary stories because they say, like, oh, I know this story or whatever.
Yep.
So, like, what was their scary story education? Because legit, we all know you don't take things from a haunted house.
Yeah.
We all know you don't run upstairs. You don't hide under the bed. You cannot destroy the book. You cannot give it. Like, we all know the rules, but they apparently don't know the rules.
They obviously have never seen a scary story or
Well, it's
a
like-
scary movie.
It's like when you're in a zombie movie and there's never been zombies before. There's never been a zombie movie before. This is like a whole new thing.
Right, but they've been told scary stories before. They admit it.
Only certain ones, though.
That's true. That's true.
So at this point, they start like conducting some research on Sarah's life and family because they're like, how the heck are we going to get Augie back? Like, we got to figure out how we get our friend back. And they realized that at one point, Sarah's entire family disappeared. And they noticed, like, just randomly disappeared. There was no, like, small, like, they
No,
eventually
and
moved
all
away.
like within a year of her death.
Yeah.
They disappear.
And they recognized some of the names throughout the book in different
Right.
scary stories.
Right. And this is where, as she's leafing through the scary stories, we see another view of a couple of them, specifically though the Wendy Boys one, and with a very specific, like, they changed some of the names of like the tracker that they hired for that
Yeah.
story or whatever. Like, they zero in on some of those names, and some of those names are the sources that the author cites in the back of the book as the people who told him these stories. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's like, they're flipping through it, and then you see, like you said, you see a couple of the stories. And at that point, then the book starts freaking out and it starts writing another story. And it's called The Red Spot. And at that point, Chuck has been talking about, he's been having these dreams about the Red Room. So he thought it was about him, and then all of a sudden it says his sister's name, Ruth.
Mm-hmm.
And now the red spot is a short story, I believe, in the third book, in the collection. And so it moves over to her perspective with the spider bite. And this one is so freaking terrifying. I
Mm-hmm.
hate this one. So
Mm-hmm.
she is sitting and they're all in like a different location and they're reading it and they see that it's about her and they're like, okay, we got to go find Ruth and I have to go run to her. And we see from Ruth's perspective, she's like in a play or something.
Yeah, she's in like the school play, I think.
Yeah. And she's sitting looking at the mirror, looking at her spot on her cheek.
What
Might
she
be the
thinks is
first
it.
book. Not
Is it the first book?
It might be the first book. I don't remember now.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the first or the third. I can't remember.
I remember that one, and I only read the third one like maybe twice. I read the
Okay.
first one like a bajillion times. It may have been the first one.
Okay. So she has she thinks it's a pimple and it's just getting huge on her face. Like literally huge, about to pop. It almost looks like a pimple because it looks like it's a giant whitehead
Yeah.
in the middle of it. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's like the Dr. Pimple Popper's
Yeah, and I hate
dream.
those gross me out. Like I will absolutely gag. And so I'm watching this and I'm like,
Yeah.
I love,
It was not
those videos.
Of course, Lindsay loves them. Oh my
I
god.
can't watch
Oh,
I can't
no.
watch them. Like all my sisters love that. I'm just over here like no, like not gonna do it.
I'm not even surprised that Lindsay loves them. But so it eventually a little leg pops out of the bump and all of a sudden it bursts and all these little baby spiders
Just
freaking
rips
fly
the
out
side
of
of her
it.
face open. Like
Yeah.
the whole side of her face is just like a gaping hole of like spiders.
Just like
Again,
in the book.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
That
like
one was
from like
pretty
another
exact.
dimension, just spiders.
Yeah.
It
That
was
one was pretty exact
Mm-hmm.
of the book. And then everyone comes in to help her. I'm pretty sure they throw a bucket of mop water on her because she's
Yes.
screaming.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure Stella notices that there's a shadow on the
Mm-hmm.
wall and notices that it's Sarah's spirit on the wall or something
Mm-hmm.
at that point.
Sarah's watching.
Yeah, she's
She
watching.
is orchestrating all of this.
Yeah. And so also in their research, they find someone named Lulu, who was once a servant to the Bellows family. And they go and meet this person to kind of get some more information about Sarah Bellows because now at this point, all this crazy stuff has happened. One of their friends is completely gone. Ruth is now been hospitalized or because
Like
she's
they
kind of
mentioned they've sent her to an institution. Like she's snapped, which I don't blame her for.
Yeah. And which I thought this was interesting because whenever Lulu's kind of talking a little bit about Sarah and saying, I think at this point she kind of indicates that she did not commit suicide at the house.
Right, that they found her hanged in the hospital, and they're like, "In
Yes.
the hospital?" And she was like, "Yeah, at the hospital."
Yeah. And she sings the Hearst song.
It's actually not the Hearst song.
It's not.
Oh, I thought it was.
It has the same lines as the Hearst song, but it's You May Be Next, which is from the third book.
Oh, I thought it was the Hearst song. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I was like, oh. Okay. Yeah, she sings one of the songs from the book. And then at that point they realize that they need to go to the hospital to find more information.
The records.
Yeah. And they sneak into the hospital to look at the records. I'm like, this is a HIPAA violation? What's going on here?
Right? I had to remind myself that there was no HIPAA, Crystal. Stop being pedantic. There was no HIPAA back in 1968.
And Sarah Bellows had been dead for 100 years.
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's fine. But they go to the hospital, and also Chuck has been talking about how he's been having, like, dreams or something about this thing called the Red
The
Room.
red room and the
Yeah.
pale
The pale
woman.
lady.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
pale lady. And so he's like, and this place is called the Red Room because it's like records. It's like RED stands for something.
Records and something
Something
department. I can't
department.
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, examination or something.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's like, I'm not going in there. That's the Red Room, and that's what I've been dreaming about. So I'm not doing it. And this Sarah lady's like writing stories about everybody, so I'm not doing it. So he goes separately and like does his own thing. And
Which, again, this is another one of the rules.
yeah,
You
don't
don't separate.
separate. You have to stay together. Don't separate. So Ramon and Stella go and kind of get some more information about Sarah, where they find out through recordings that Sarah's brother was actually performing electroshock therapy on her to get her to confess to
Mhm.
killing children because of what their family was actually doing to children.
Right. So she's like saying he's shocking her and saying, "Tell us the truth."
Yeah.
She's like, "You killed them because of the mercury in the water from the factory,
The
Mhm.
paper mill.
the paper mill."
Mhm.
And he's like, "No, we all know what happened, Sarah. You did this." And she's like, "No, you killed them." But he keeps shocking her, and finally she's like, "I'll tell you what you want to hear."
Yeah.
That creeped me out when she was like, "I'll tell you what you want to hear." I was
Yeah.
like, "Ooh, goosies."
And
Like,
then
Yeah.
starts to tell the story.
and then
Yeah.
then she starts to tell the next story.
Yeah, instead of, like, what we keep seeing written in the book, she starts telling a story about Chuck. And
Mhm.
pan over to Chuck, he is running around, running away from security for some reason, like, "You need to stay put, like, what are you doing?
They
Why
probably
are
think he's
you."
a patient.
Yeah, I know,
Right.
you're literally running away from security, doing all this crazy stuff, and all the lights go red because it's going into, like, emergency thing because they
Like a
think somebody's, like,
lockdown or
yeah,
something, yeah.
and he's like, "Oh gosh," it's like the Red Room situation, and all of a sudden he sees the pale lady, and this was crazy. That I know I keep talking about the illustrations, but
This
what
was
this one was the best one.
yeah,
Yeah.
This was
yeah,
shocking.
absolutely.
The way that they made this illustration come to life in the movie was wild. I mean, this one kinda didn't scare me that much because honestly, at first it was, like, kinda scary when it was, far away, but then when it came close up, I started laughing because I was like, "What is that?"
But also the red hurt my eyes.
Yeah, yeah. The red was definitely hurting my eyes, but, like, just it, like, standing there, like, swaying, I was like, "What is it doing?" It's kind of funny,
It
but
was
also creepy.
it was the best of all of the illustrations, and I
Yes.
was screaming in my living
Yeah,
room, so excited to see that because that was the nostalgia for me. That
yeah,
was when I was like, because that was the creepiest part of this book
yeah.
when I was a kid were the
Yeah,
illustrations.
that like, just that picture, the illustration in the book was terrifying.
Yep.
But also, is she wearing a nightgown? Is she wearing skin? What is she
She was
wearing?
totally wearing skin.
Right.
Yeah,
It was the
it
best.
was
It was so
so
gross.
creepy and weird. I believe that the title of that story is The Dream,
Yes.
and I think that one is from the 3rd
Yep.
book. I feel like they're just, like, all, like, blending together at this
And they
point.
do because, like, they purposely I mean, they had to fit as many stories as they could into
Yeah,
this movie.
yeah. So that one, yeah, that was from the 3rd one, and so he gets cornered by this pale lady and gets, like, absorbed by the pale lady,
Mhm.
and he's gone.
Yep.
Like, literally, "See ya."
All
Literally don't
except
ever
for
see
his
him.
pen.
Yeah, so Stella and Ramon are looking for him, and they know that he's gone because the sexy lady pen is on the ground, and they know Chuck wouldn't leave his
He
sexy
wouldn't have
lady
just left
pen.
this. Yep.
Nope, nope. So now at this point, Stella and Ramon are arrested because they were like sneaking around this place. They weren't supposed to be
But
in
they're
this
the last 2
hospital.
standing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they're now in these cells, stuck there, knowing that this book is like coming for them next.
Mhm.
And we also find out that Ramon was actually dodging the Vietnam War draft as well, because his brother, something happened with his brother in the war. His brother died and he didn't want to go to the Vietnam War, so he was also dodging that. And so they're both in the cells and they're kind of like waiting of what's going to happen next, and they're trying to tell this police officer, "Hey, this is what's going on with this book." And the police officer is like, "Yeah, right. Okay,
Right.
whatever you say."
Like a typical grown-up would.
Yeah. And see, this is why they don't involve adults in it. All the kids got to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So while they're in the cell, something starts happening with the chimney.
And the dog.
And the dog starts growling. I mean, the animals always know everything. You
The
got to pay
animals do.
attention to the animals.
Trust your pets.
Yep. And at this point, so I was kind of reading about this, and I heard that this character is not just for one story.
He's like a combination.
Yeah, he's like,
Yeah.
it's like a combination of multiple short stories in this.
Right.
It's Mitai Dodie Walker and
Jangly Man.
well, Jangly Man's not in the book.
Yeah.
Right. But like it's like a
The
combination of a lot.
footsteps or the attic or something.
Yeah, it's like a character that is a combination of multiple of the short stories.
Right.
But it's for Ramon. And this thing that's in like multiple parts, his head flies out of the chimney, rolls to the ground, and this is me. The police officer looks at it and he goes,
What?
"Are you shitting me?" That's me.
But then he shoots it too.
And then he shoots it.
I mean, okay,
Perfect.
to be fair, the double tap is a tried and true
Yeah.
Oh, I
way
agree.
to deal.
That would have
So,
been
like,
me.
It usually works.
Right.
You know,
Chief
in
Turner
the head.
doing the real work out here.
But
Exactly.
the dead silence and then that quote, I was like, that's me. That's something I would totally say. I would be like,
No, you wouldn't. It would come out that chimney. You'd be standing right there and you go, "What the hell?
What the hell?
What the hell?"
what the hell? What the
You
hell
need-
going on here?
And the fact that the dog was also talking before the head came down the chimney,
Yep.
Yeah.
which is what happens in the story too.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But then
So-
the dog was like, "I'm out."
Yeah.
Which
Dog
is
was
nice.
like, "Peace."
He dies in the book.
Right.
I
Mhm.
know. And it's
They weren't gonna do
sad.
that. They were like,
I don't
"No,
like
we ain't
when
killing
animals
dogs."
die.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me depressed.
Netflix was like, "This ain't that movie. The
Yeah,
dog
this
lives."
ain't that kind of movie.
Like-
This PG-13, we save the animals.
But we will absolutely break this person's neck.
Yeah, we will break this
No big
person's
deal.
neck. We don't care.
No big deal. Just a hard snap.
Yeah.
Like,
Police officer's gone.
You
And
First
then
call.
I would not have let whatever that creature was close enough to me to grab my head. How did that happen?
yeah,
How
I
did
don't
that
know.
happen? He just
So-
stood there waiting for it to put itself together. Like,
Yeah. So like it comes out of the chimney. It's like all of its limbs.
like a Lego dude.
Yeah, like a Lego dude, and he puts himself together and then he starts like walking over to the cells to go after Ramon. And because also before that, they're all yelling, "What does the book say? Like, what does the book say? Like, you gotta tell us what the book says."
What? And
And,
then
like-
they just yell, "What's the name?" And
Yeah,
the sheriff
what's the name?
says,
What's the name? Ramon.
Ramon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's how they know. And this thing is trying to get to Ramon, like squeezing itself through the cells, which is like freaking me out. The whole time Stella's trying to grab the keys off the police officer. The dead police officer that's laying on the ground unlocks the cell for them so they can get out and run away from this thing. And as they get outside, Ramon's like about to get in the police officer car and he's like, "You need to get back to that house. And
Yeah,
we need
you've
to
got to go
fix
tell
this.
Sarah the truth. You've got
You
to.
need to fix this." So she's running back to the house. Ramon's trying to get this freaking crazy thing off his car and get the heck out of here and get to that house to help Stella. And when Stella gets there, I'm assuming that this was supposed to be the story, the haunted house.
Mhm.
But this was kind of like doing its own thing.
Yeah, it
Not-
went in a few different ways.
Yeah, not super comparative to the haunted house.
It was
Short
also
story.
Stella's story because
Yes.
if you remember, all of the stories kind of correlate with the characters. Where Tommy didn't like the scarecrow, he became the scarecrow.
Yeah.
Augie was conscious about food and he ate the big toe. Chuck was having the dreams about the red room and he got by the pale lady.
Yep.
And it was the dream and all. Ramon was afraid of the draft and the jangly man is calling him a coward the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mhm.
Stella can kind of relate to Sarah being an outcast writing stories. So
Yeah.
she relives Sarah's trauma and is
Yes.
becoming Sarah.
Yeah. So at that point, she kind of like goes back in time
Mhm.
to Sarah's life.
And she is Sarah.
She is Sarah.
She embodies Sarah.
Yeah. She's like hiding from Sarah's family, like from her brothers,
Mhm.
as they're calling for Sarah, and they drag her out. She even sees like Lulu, and Lulu
Right.
tells
Lulu
her to
tries
hide.
to help. Yeah, tries to help her.
Thinking that she's Sarah, and she's like dragging her, or the brothers find her and like drag her down to the
And they're
cellar.
all yelling that like Sarah was telling people what we did.
Yeah.
And even the mother is like, get her in there, and locking the door.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then shuts the lights off
Mhm.
and says, you don't deserve the light. Like,
Yeah.
can you imagine? And then, like, and this is before she got taken off to the hospital for her brother to break her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, can you imagine knowing that your whole family, no wonder Sarah turned into a vengeful ghost,
Yeah.
you know?
And then in current day, like as she's going through this whole situation, so her glasses fall off, which is, I thought this was actually really cool. Her
Yes.
glasses fall off
Back
during
in
that
time.
back in time. In current day, Ramon is like at this haunted house, like fighting that thing, and he finds like her old glasses
And they're broken
where,
and they're
and
covered
they're,
in ashes and dirty
yeah,
and yeah.
like where it would have been like back then,
Right.
which
If
was,
it
it
had
was like
sat there
so
for
weird.
100 years.
Yeah. Also, the whole time I was like, "Where's her glasses?" As someone who
Right.
wears glasses, I was like, "Someone
Yeah.
get her
Like
glasses.
that
She
was
can't see."
like that was a terrifying moment for me because I was like, oh, not her glasses.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm like, "She can't see anything. They're so scared she can't see." Like that, there's nothing worse. Like you're at a haunted house and I don't have my glasses either. Like I'm
yeah.
terrified.
Mm-mm.
That's the true horror.
Yeah,
Pretty
that's really
much.
the
That
true
was the
horror. Give her
scariest part of the
glasses.
whole movie.
Yeah, that's the jump scare right there. And finally she meets Sarah, and or Sarah's spirit.
And this is when you
And
finally see Sarah for the first time. No one knows
Right.
what she looks like. No one's
yeah,
ever seen her
Right.
besides her family.
yeah, and they kind of have like this
Well, at first
emotional.
she's like, I'm gonna get you, Stella. And then Stella's like, no, you ain't.
Yeah.
My
She's like
turn.
she's like, "You need to stop this, and you need to stop doing this to all these people. Like, what's the point of doing this?" And Stella makes a promise to Sarah to tell Sarah's true story in this book of stories. And she's like, "I will share it with everyone so that all these monsters will vanish." And she's like, "Okay, like write it down. You must write it in blood, in your blood." And she starts to write the truth of Sarah to make all
Mhm.
of this stop. And I was like, "Oh, isn't that cute?"
And
I
then
like
Sarah
it.
screams in her face.
Yeah. Like, wow, I do appreciate it.
Like,
Also,
you're
okay.
welcome. You're
I'm like,
welcome.
"Okay, all the monsters are gonna vanish. Like, this is great. Everything's gonna be
Right?
fine." Okay, and now where's Chuck and Augie?
Right.
Gone.
I was like,
Still gone.
Sarah's gonna go and everyone's gonna come back to the way things were. Nope.
Nope. They're still gone. Still gone. So, at the end, poor Ramon has to, leave for war, and he accepts his enlistment, and, Stella says she's gonna write to him, and at that point, Stella and her dad.
Hank from Breaking Bad.
Yeah,
Yup.
yeah.
Yup.
And Ruth decide to, like, run away together to
Ruth with
see.
her scarred up face.
Yeah, they, like, take her from, like, the institution,
And they're gonna
and
try and go find
Chuck and
Augie and
Augie and
Chuck.
figure this apparently that there is a script finished for the second movie,
Oh, good. I was
and
hoping.
there were talks about, doing the second movie. I'm not sure where
Fingers
that
crossed.
is at this moment. But yeah, and that's how the movie ends.
Forget about Tommy. He gone.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
no,
gone, but
he's
we
the
don't
bad
care about
guy.
that guy.
We don't
Screw
care
that
about
guy.
Tommy. Well, we know where he is. He's in the field.
Yeah, he's in the field.
And then
He's
forget
watching the crows.
forget about Chief Turner. He did.
Yeah, dead as hell.
Gone. He
R.I.P.
gone.
R.I.P. So am curious if you guys hope for like more stories in the movie. Like, did you think that there were enough of the stories, or if you wanted more?
I think there were enough to make this movie work. I
I
think
think
if
so.
they had tried to stuff any more in there, I don't think it would have. Because I think, and this is again part of why I love this is like being able to catch. Oh, like I recognize this one. Oh, I recognize that one. But like in enough of a in a smooth enough of a way that it didn't become jumbled, it didn't feel forced, it didn't feel wrong, you know? And I think honestly, I think even just one more story probably would have been too much. This was just the perfect. They did such a good job. They
I
did
like
Yeah.
such a good job.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I think the only thing I kind of wish for is maybe like the sneaky stuff, like maybe not just like full things of the short stories, but like the sneaky things that only you could like slightly catch on.
The little
Right.
Easter eggs and
Yeah,
stuff.
the little
Yep.
Easter eggs.
Mhm.
I kind of
Yep.
wish there were more of those.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'd have been okay with that.
yeah, that kind of leads into our question of the episode of your favorite short story from all three collections. What's the one that you would love to see as a full-length novel or movie?
Okay. So
Crystal?
I have a couple, but
Me too.
honestly
I say
honestly,
one. I have a couple. It's okay.
any of the stories that have roots in old folklore, I love. I'm like I just kind of am super into that kind of stuff. But I think one of my favorite ones is A New Horse, where a witch turns the farmhand into a horse at night and rides him
That
rides
picture
and ride it.
scared me.
Like
I don't like that
that's
picture.
yeah, no, that
Who
was
wants
definitely
that
creepy.
horse?
Yeah.
Nobody wants that horse. That was a horrible picture. And if they work that into the next movie, I don't know how they would do that. But I don't want them to. That'd be gross. But no, that's one of my favorites. It does have roots in Appalachia, that story. And being living in Kentucky as long as I have, that's kind of really interesting for me. I think kind of expanding. There's a lot of stories of like witchcraft or wherever where the witch turns into an animal or can turn other people into animals. And so I feel like there's a ton of material there and it could make an
Mhm.
awesome movie.
Yeah, definitely.
I really liked Mitai Dodie Walker in the book. That was one of my favorites, but I hated that they killed the dog in the story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But the Jangly Man was my favorite monster in the movie. So I want to know more about the Jangly Man.
Mm,
Um there was another I think it was Cold as Clay
that's
where
a good one.
yeah, that's the one with the farmer and his daughter. The daughter
Mhm.
falls in love. The father doesn't approve, so he sends her away. But then the man that she falls in love with, he ends up dying, but she doesn't know that. He shows up on a horse
Mhm.
to pick her up and says that her dad has summoned her and they have to get to the house immediately. So they ride all night and they get to the house, and the whole time they're riding, she's like, "Oh, you're as cold as clay here." And she ties a handkerchief around his neck or his head or something.
Mhm.
Gets to the house, and the father's like, "What are you doing here?" And she's like, "Didn't you send for me?" And he's like, "No." And then the guy's gone. The horse is there. The horse is terrified. They go and dig the guy up, and the handkerchief is tied around him.
Mhm.
It's a good one.
I marked that one too. I
Yeah,
have like a
that's a good
bunch
one.
of the I had stories that I really enjoyed tabbed in the book because I have the one that has all 3 collections in one book, and that was one I really, really loved. I would have loved to see that as, like, a full-length story or movie. I loved all the ones that had, like, a ghost type or, like, a spirit
Mhm.
type backstory,
What's
but
the one sorry, you go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
oh, no, you're fine. But one that I don't know why this one really got me and totally like, I cannot stop thinking about this one. And, like, to this day, ever since I read it, was The Wolf Girl from the
Oh.
3rd book.
Yeah.
I physically cannot get this one out of my head. I physically cannot get the picture out of my head. It is stuck with me. I feel like it's stuck with me for eternity. I I actually went and did, like, a deep dive of some, like of the background of, like, several stories that I mean, the folklore behind there's, like, all kinds of myths and legends behind stories like this,
Yeah.
where I believe a man tries to get help because his wife is giving birth. He gets struck by lightning or something whenever he comes back, and his wife had died while he was gone, or, like, they didn't know they couldn't come back to her. His wife died while she was giving birth, and they come and the baby was gone,
Mhm.
and they kept seeing a girl that was always running around with this pack of wolves, and it was growing up with this pack of wolves. And she literally and then all of a sudden it was like people would always see, like, hunters and all these things would see this grown woman just running around like a feral woman running around with this pack of wolves. Like, they would try to capture her because they would think that she needed help or something. At one point, they do capture her, her, like, in a house, and, like, all these wolves are howling and howling because they're so
Because
freaked
she's
out that
gone.
she's
Yep.
gone, and she's howling back, like, she's literally howling herself back, scratching at the windows to get out, and she eventually, like, escapes and runs away with them. Like, at one point, they see her taking care of, like, 2
Nursing
pups.
pups.
Mhm.
Yes. Like, and they try to, like, talk to her, and she runs away, like, grabs the pups and runs away with them. I don't know why I can't get this story out of my head. It won't leave.
That's a
I'm,
good
like,
one.
freaked out. I'm, like but also so intrigued by it. So, that's one it's very much stuck with me. I like that one. What were you gonna say, Crystal?
Oh, I was thinking about the one with the ghost house. Like, the travelers, and they were like, "Can
Yes,
we
that was a
stop
good
here for the
one.
night? Would we can we pay for lodging?" And they were like, "Well, we won't take your money, but we'd love to have guests and we'll talk or whatever." And then they leave before the couple of the owners wake up, and they leave some money behind because they feel like that's the right thing to do, and then they leave and they get to where they were going, and they're kinda saying, "Oh, yeah, we stopped at this house, they let us stay the night." And they were like, "What are you talking about? That house burned down years ago." And they go back and the house is not there, but the envelope with the money they left is still there. Like,
It,
that's
like, burned down or something.
right. And there's tons of stories like that with, like, a ghost house. I
Mhm.
love those are some of my favorites because,
Yeah.
like, you have lots of different kinds of ghost house stories, like the benevolent, like, "Yeah, you can stay here, we're happy, like, we're not gonna hurt you, you're safe," you know? And then there's the, like, "If you come in here, you're never getting out again,"
Yeah.
like, and everything
Yeah.
in between, so
Yeah.
those are some of my favorite ghost stories.
Yeah. I think there were a lot of good ones in here. So,
Mhm.
I'm excited to see if they make another movie, what they're gonna do with it, if they add a lot more stories to it.
And if they get Augie and Chuck back.
Yeah, hopefully.
I don't like them. I don't care.
I don't leave them.
Like, "Bye."
So that wraps up this episode of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. As always, you can find links to our social media and podcast platforms in the description, including our YouTube channel, where you find our full video podcast episodes. Also, next week is our Halloween special featuring Silence of the Lambs in the 1991 adaptation, which I am currently terrified about.
It's so good.
Yay!
So thanks everyone for listening, and we will catch you all in the next chapter of Based on a Book. Bye!